Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Plant Free MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today I have a very special return guest, Dr. Nash Yosich, who is a professional bodybuilder and scholar, and here to talk to us today about bodybuilding, glycogen, what you actually need as a high-performance athlete and bodybuilder from a nutrition standpoint. Dr. Yosich, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me back again. I hope that we are going to manage a great podcast and that our viewers are going to learn something new today.
Absolutely.
This is the main reason we are here, actually.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about that we were talking about previously was this idea about glycogen. So I've made several posts about being athletic or doing a carnivore diet and how this helps people's health. But then we get a lot of athletes that say, well, but don't you need glycogen? Don't you need carbohydrates to fuel your athletic endeavors, to be an athlete, to be a bodybuilder? And I've sort of responded in certain ways, but it'd be great to hear your take as a professional bodybuilder and trainer.
Yeah, this is a very common issue. This is actually a stigma which is prevailing in the fitness world in general, in bodybuilding world.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the idea that if you don't eat carbohydrates, you will never have a full glycogen storage, so your performance will drop regardless of which sport you are in. But this is not true. I'm actually the best example, and I can tell you my own experience, which always was the best because it's first-hand experience with carbohydrates and glycogen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still training and doing everything the same as I always did 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always in shape. My workouts usually 45 to 50 minutes. And within that time, I perform 30 to 40 sets per session. So, for example, I have done chest yesterday. I did 30 sets for chest, and I did 10 sets for abs, and that was all covered within 50 minutes. So you just imagine how much glycogen I had to use in order to perform that training session. So we are talking reps anywhere from 8 to 12, rest between the set, never more than 60 seconds, probably 45 in isolation exercises, 30 seconds, 45 seconds max. So there is a lot of glycogen going out. Now the question is, where did I get that glycogen from? And I don't eat any carbohydrates. As you know, I spoke about that in the last podcast, and also in so many of my videos. My viewers know that I don't eat any carbs. I usually eat 3 meals a day. They are made of protein and fat. Occasionally, I may have some salad or pickled veg. Rarely, but sometimes I do. And this is all I eat. So it's predominantly protein and also fat. So the ratio of protein and fat in my diet, I try to be anywhere between 2 to 1. So if I have 300 grams of protein, I will have 150 grams of fat. This is what works for me. And I'm in shape all the time because of that. And you can see my pictures, my videos that I post on my YouTube channel, on my videos, and you will see in what kind of shape I am. And I'm constantly in that shape. So where the glycogen comes from? I think it's a myth that glycogen comes from carbohydrates exclusively. We know that glycogen also comes from gluconeogenesis. This is the process that happens in the liver, during which liver converts amino acids and glycerol into glycogen. So amino acids obviously come from protein, and glycerol is the backbone of triglycerides. So when you eat fat, triglycerides, they break into fatty acids and glycerol. Glycerol gets converted into glycogen. So we need to understand one thing, that gluconeogenesis will convert as much glycogen as needed. So if you are burning, let's say, 100 grams of glycogen per session, which is probably the case with most people, there are people who burn even less. Hardly anybody will burn 150 grams of glycogen. This has to be like 2-hour workout with maybe 50, 60 sets or something like that. But in average, we're talking 100 grams of glycogen. So the body will replenish that 100 grams of glycogen within 24 to 48 hours after your session. So let's say you've done chest on Monday, until next Monday, the glycogen in your chest will be fully restored, because the body restores glycogen immediately within a day or two, and it will convert the same equivalent of protein. So probably 100 grams of protein will be converted in 100 grams of glycogen. And this is how the body works. So if you eat 300 grams of protein, 100 grams of protein will go into glycogen replenishment. So there is no other way when you are on low carb diet, but you will still have your glycogen. So now, why is that? What is the biggest proof of that? Is that some scientific research? Yes, they've done scientific researches, and there is one done by Wallach and Finney in 2016. They measured the amount of glycogen in runners who run 3 hours before and after. So there were two groups. One group was on keto diet, and another one was on high carb diet. So in both cases, both group of runners had the same amount of glycogen before the run and also after the run. So this is the best proof that if you are keto athlete, you will still have your glycogen there at the beginning, at the end, the same as somebody who is on high carbohydrate diet. But actually, the much bigger scientific experiment has been done throughout evolution, through human evolution. So let's look retrospectively. How did we evolve? What was the staple food for humans? There were no carbohydrates. There were no cereals, Choco Pops and Choco Pop Rice, whatever they're called. It wasn't pasta around or bread. So for hundreds of thousands of years, the staple food for humans was meat and fat. There is a beautiful book written, the Land of Fat of the Land, sorry.
Fat of the Land, yeah.
Yes, and this is another scientific proof. I think it was Dr. Was it White?
It's Wilhelmer Stefansson.
Yes, yeah, sorry. The other one was a dentist, as far as I remember. So he went, spent a year or more than that with Inuits, and he actually did follow their diet, which was exclusively on fat and protein. And he came out much healthier, in much better shape than he was before he went there. So how did we evolve? No carbohydrates, protein and fat. Did humans have their glycogen stores full? Of course they had. They had to have it because they had to fight, they had to run, they have to run to kill, they have to run to save their lives. So the glycogen must be there. It's an evolutionary necessity. So the body will always replenish as much glycogen as needed, wherever is needed. So when you train your chest, you burn glycogen from chest. So it's local replenishment. There is we can't talk about complete, total replenishment because it never happens like that. So the body stores anywhere from 4 to 5 grams of glycogen in the muscle cells, and then anywhere from 80 to 100 grams of glycogen in the liver for most people, again, depending on the size and body weight. But when you train a muscle, you will burn 100 grams of glycogen, and that will be an easy job for the body to do within a day or two. Those 100 grams of locally burned glycogen, either they're in chest or legs or back, will be replenished. And then the body will carry on. So if you're training, let's say 4 times per week, you're going to have that usage of glycogen every single time, roughly around 100 grams. You may burn more glycogen when you train your back than your shoulders, but the body will always replenish that local amount of glycogen, obviously used in particular workouts. So it's absolutely a myth that you need carbohydrates exclusively to replenish glycogen. I can explain to you obviously how it goes through the workouts and competitive bodybuilding if you want to know that. And this is another proof that the best results actually come from very low or zero carbohydrate diets if you're a bodybuilder.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I mean, you're a professional coach. So you have professional bodybuilders that you work with, and this is presumably the dietary plan that you have them on. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. Most of my clients who compete are always on high protein, medium fat diet year round. So they're always in a very good shape. Now, when the time comes to compete, anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, depending on how good shape they are in the off season, we will start a diet which will be very precise. It's always very personal, depending on an individual, because I know them, I know how they function, how they train, their metabolism and everything. So we get them in shape within 8 to 12 weeks. So they start training slightly higher volume, but the amount of carbohydrates is very low or zero. Now I only play with protein and fat. If I need them harder, we will reduce fat a little bit, and then you monitor and they get in shape. Now another question is, most of them, they train like 6 times per week. So how do they train 6 times per week, performing 30, 40 sets per session if they don't have glycogen? Mm-hmm. So again, where the glycogen comes from is not a miracle, it's not a mystery. Mm-hmm. It's always from high protein, medium fat diet that I train my athletes with. Also myself, I was a competitive bodybuilder. I competed 46 times, won 17 titles. And I know exactly what I've done when I was competing. Obviously, there were days when I didn't know as much as I know now. And I wish I did, but that usually never happens when you are in the middle of the battle. You don't know much, as much you will know later when you learn from your own experience. But every time I have followed the high protein, medium fat, which will end up being high protein, low fat, never zero fat, but low fat, I would be in the best shape. Now, there were days when I used to do that famous carb up. You know, a lot of people probably ask about that. Mm-hmm. Carbing up before the show. You need carbs to make your glycogen full. If you carb deplete, and then how do you carb deplete? Oh, you stop eating carbs for 3, 4, 5 days. That last week before the show, you stop eating carbohydrates. And then what happens? Oh, you just eat protein and a little bit of fat. And then what happens? Oh, you burn your glycogen. Really? So I tried to do that. And I wanted to be scientific also. So I used keto stick. This is the measurement of your ketosis. And I was never in red, although I didn't eat any carbohydrates. So I was trying to carb deplete, as so many try to do, but my keto stick was never red. It was pink at most. So I was never in ketosis because I never went so deep that my body didn't have any glycogen. And then what happened? The last 3 days, thinking your glycogen stores are depleted, you start eating carbohydrates. But they're not depleted because of gluconeogenesis. Every time you did your days without carbohydrates, the body will replace them, your glycogen, via gluconeogenesis. So your carbohydrate glycogen stores were almost full every single time, regardless of your attempt to deplete them. Now you eat carbohydrates. You start with 300-400 grams day 1. Then day 2, you eat 250. Then day 3, you eat 150. At least the stigma says that way, right? The belief. And you end up fat and watery. And what you have to do now, or you have to take diuretics. And what are diuretics going to do? They're going to actually drain the water from your muscles mainly. It will never just going to be the water under your skin, because it doesn't work like that. So why did you put even fat? Or why did you retain water? Because you went on carb up. Simply because, because of the carbs, because of insulin. When insulin goes up, it forces the kidneys to retain more sodium, hence water retention. And this was the magic vicious cycle that caught me a few times until I realized, I learned from other more experienced people, that you don't actually do that. Most of them who were always winning shows, they would stop eating carbohydrates for 3-4 months. And they will end up in fantastic shape, good 10-15 days before the show. So once you get that best shape before the show, you don't change anything. Because how did you get there? You get there by high volume, high number of sets, relatively high number of reps for every muscle group, eating high protein, medium fat, or high protein, low fat last few weeks, and you cruise into that best shape. Then you don't change anything. You just relax because you know you're in the best possible shape. Your cut, veins are out, you're dry, And what happens most of the time? Oh, I have to carb up. I have to carb deplete and then carb up. And then everything goes out of the window. It happened to me a few times. I lost few shows just because of that. But now with my clients, actually, I don't do that anymore. And I get them in top shape for every single show. So this is the story of carving up and eating carbohydrates for energy. Most people before the show train more than ever, more than off season, and they don't eat any carbs. How is that possible? How can you train more without glycogen? Yes, you can, because you're still having glycogen, thanks to gluconeogenesis, an evolutionary development that is always with us. So you either ignore it or you accept it. That's it.
Yeah. And I like how you brought up the faster trial as well. That's the Volek and Finney trial in 2016. So they called it the faster trial, where they had the glycogen before a 3 hour run and straight after. They also checked 3 hours after that, after recovery, and the carb athletes that were sucking down sugary packets and gels and things like that, they recovered at the exact same rate that the ketogenic group did, but with their natural reproduction of glycogen and storage in their muscles and their liver. So, I mean, these were muscle biopsies specifically, but you can extrapolate that they would have a similar replenishment of their glycogen in their liver as well. And interestingly, no drop off in performance. And that's the other thing that it's very strange. People really get infatuated with carbohydrates, because when you look at the fat oxidation, so in the faster trial and other trials, they look at the oxidation rate, or the amount of energy burned from different sources. And in the faster trial, they actually found that they were still burning fat oxidation in their muscles at over 90% VO2 max, and then that's when it was starting to shift over. But in other trials from Professor Noakes down in South Africa, they actually found that there would still be that the transition point when they were switched from predominantly fat oxidation in their muscles to predominantly carbohydrates was at 86% VO2 max for some of these people. So that's far above the 50, 55% VO2 max that normally people would say, yeah, that's when you switch into carbs. You can't be a high performance athlete without carbs, because you after 55% VO2 max, you're going to be predominantly burning carbs. And that's only if you're a carbohydrate athlete. And so if you're a ketogenic athlete, it's mostly fat oxidation, and then your body is more than capable of replenishing glycogen and using the blood sugar. Because like you said, in the glycerol pathway, so there are multiple different pathways for gluconeogenesis. Those are two major ones. The glycerol pathway, for every unit of triglycerides that you pop off the fat, you're going to have a glycerol backbone that can be turned into glucose and glycogen. So for every unit of fat that you're burning to generate your exercise, you are necessarily making a specific percentage of glucose and glycogen. So you're constantly replenishing your glucose per demand. So the harder you're working, the more glucose and glycogen you're producing through the glycerol pathway. Also the lactate pathway. People don't understand that they think that the body's just catabolizing and breaking down protein that breaks down your muscles. That's not true. That's only one pathway. Early on in fasting, you'll have more protein, but then when you get into deeper ketosis, it's predominantly glycerol and then lactate as well. So when you're pushing yourself really hard, that lactate gets recycled into glycogen again, and so that's another form. And even when eating carbohydrates, your body's always going through some form of gluconeogenesis, and you typically have it the same amount. So you're going to produce on an average sedentary day anywhere from 40 to 80 grams of glucose when you're eating carbohydrates, and also when you're not eating carbohydrates. So it actually doesn't change. So people say, well, this puts you in a stress state. It actually doesn't. It's an automatic sort of response. And when you're exercising, you're breaking down that fat and you're producing more glycogen as a result of that per demand. And so that's very that's a very telling study as well. But the thing that I find interesting is that people will look at that and you'll say, okay, so in the Noakes trial, they found that people were actually burning 1.8 grams of fat per minute, which ends, if you calculate that out, that ends up being about 1,000 calories per minute. or sorry, per hour that they're burning. That's a very high rate. That's sort of like the Tour de France, like their average energy expenditure would be about 1,000 calories an hour. And they found that in ketosis, you can just get that from fat. And that's at that inflection point when they've actually started to burn carbs as well. So maybe that's only 60% of the energy that they're burning was that 1,000 calories from fat. So you're talking about another 600 calories, 700 calories from gluconeogenesis, right? So then the argument is, well, you're not going to have as much of an explosive workout. You're not going to be able to lift weights. You're not going to be able to do that. Or if they're endurance athletes, say, well, you can do the weightlifting. You can do sprinting like rugby, but you can't do Tour de France. Or you could do a marathon, but you're never going to be doing explosive work like rugby or bodybuilding. Whatever sport is the opposite of what they do and what they're trying to defend, they always say, well, you could do that one, but not obviously not my sport. And if that were the case, then people would have to explain that energy dynamic. If you're producing 1,000 to 1,600 calories of energy per hour, and your exercise only takes you 800 calories an hour or 1,000 calories an hour, what is stopping you? Where's the roadblock from that energy? Well, I guess those energy units aren't as good as these other energy units from carbohydrates. They'd have to argue why, if a calorie is just a calorie is just a calorie, and these are the same people that say that, then why is it that when you're burning more calories and generating more energy, that's not sufficient for whatever exercise you're doing? It's never actually made sense to me. There's a lot of circular reasoning that they use. So, yeah.
Yes, I also trained lots of marathon runners, by the way. And there was the guy in the gym who is really athletic, and he does different sports. And marathon is one of his. He's not a professional marathon runner, but he's still doing it because he likes to do these multiple sports. And we spoke about his time and all that. So I said, "What is your diet?" So he says, "Oh, typical, high carb, medium protein, low fat. How many times do you eat per day?" "Oh, 5, 6. You have to eat 5, 6 times per day." And I said, "Yeah, I know that you have to eat. Now, do you know why you have to eat?" And I can only eat twice a day. And then he looked at me with a smile. I was like, what is this guy talking about? I mean, everybody is eating 5, 6, 7 times per day because you have to. And I said, exactly. The question that I'm having is, why do you have to? You have to because you don't even know what is going on. You're constantly, fluctuating between that high glucose levels and drop and crash. And then you have to, eat again in order to bring your glucose up, because you're fully dependent on carbohydrates. Well, I'm not. I said I had 5 hours ago and I'm training now, and my training is going to be massive. You will never be able to perform that many sets in 45 minutes. So he got like intrigued and said, "Oh, why is that? Can you explain to me?" He says, "Look, if you're running that marathon, you'll be much better if you stop eating carbohydrates, because during the marathon, how many times you have to stop and grab those jellies which are full of sugar. Do you ever thought about why you are doing that?" "Oh, because you need sugar." But you see how natural that is, that you run, let's say, whatever. It doesn't have to be 26 miles, 24 miles.
Well, actually, just looked like we just lost your volume there.
You have me back?
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question was, why do you have to take those jellies, the glucose supplements every hour, every 2 hours? "Oh, because I'm losing sugar." So he said, what if you don't have to? What if you rely on fat? Then you will be having much more energy, simply because this is unlimited amount of energy in your body. And he tried to do that, and his time improved for 20%. And he was he was absolutely, gobsmacked, because he could not believe that all his life, he's about 40 something, that for 20 years he's been doing wrong. And now he cut his carbs, he's eating 3 times per day, he lost lots of weight, he looks much better, runs his marathons better than ever, and feels 10 times better. And every time he sees me in the gym, he has to come and hug me and says, "Nash, you saved my life." He says, "Life is much better now. I don't think about food. I used to carry it back with me constantly. I was so hysterical about eating so many times per day. Now," he says, "I'm so relaxed and I feel fantastic." And I said, "You're not just feeling, you're looking fantastic. You're constantly lean. I can see your legs are split, your calves are split, everything is great." So it's another example. So yeah,
Mhm.
Is stigma, and also comfort zone, because carbs are easier to eat. They're tasty.
Mhm.
Also, they're addictive. They pump you with all these good well-being hormones like dopamine.
Mhm.
And when people are depressed or stressed, what they do, they eat. What they eat: chocolate, ice cream, biscuits, to feel better.
Mhm.
That's this is where the story starts and the story ends, basically. So
Yeah.
why, when you are stressed or anything like that, you should eat nothing. You should not eat, because you're in completely different uh, hormonal environment. You are in a sympathetic mode, which is absolutely opposite to state of eating that your physiology prefers, and this is parasympathetic. So, well, everything goes, give me, give me, give me, let me feel good. So
Mhm.
this is the story of carbs.
Yeah.
But if you want to feel better,
Mhm.
if you want to look better, if you want to be healthier for life, and there's so many studies on that glycation, actually, that we mentioned earlier on, that actually prove that you will going to end up having much healthier life
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
later stages than if you're constantly stuffing yourself with carbs.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, especially for athletes, right? Because the glycation was sugar damage, where you get these advanced glycation end products where glucose and other carbohydrates fuse to these different molecules and damage them. That damages your arteries. That's the leading cause of cardiovascular disease, heart disease, leading cause of kidney failure, leading cause of adult onset blindness, leading cause of having to get your legs amputated is damaging those vessels from high carbohydrates. It also damages your joints. It damages the discs in your spine. And so degenerative spines, degenerative knees, degenerative shoulders. These are the athlete's toolbox. I mean, you have a skilled, craftsman, can't do much without his tools. You have Michelangelo is not going to make the David without, a sharp chisel. So, our joints are our equipment and are the tools that we use to be athletes. And glycation damages the cartilage as well. And so this is what we find when we take out cartilage out of joints, knees, shoulders, even degenerative discs in the spine. I've found evidence and studies for every single joint taking out connective tissue cartilage that showed that there's extensive glycation damage, advanced glycation end products in all of them. And so that helps preserve your body for longer, and you can be an athlete for longer. You can be athletic for longer. You have a much longer career, and then it doesn't come at the sacrifice of not being able to walk when you're 60, right? You can still be an athlete at 60, and so that's a very, very important one as well. The longevity aspect that people don't think enough about. I was going to say as well, it's a very good point that you made about how much protein you have, because I make this point to people all the time that it's not that you need necessarily a certain ratio of fat and protein. You need enough protein. You need enough fat. And that, depending on what you're doing, is different. If you're pregnant, it's going to be different. If you're sedentary, it's going to be different. If you're working out all the time and lifting weights 5 days a week, 6 days a week, is going to be different. So someone like yourself, a bodybuilder, you're building, maintaining a lot of musculature, you're going to need more protein. So that ratio is going to look different than someone who's a bit more sedentary, and doesn't need all that much protein. And so when just the normal public, like if I were talking to a patient, I would tend to say that usually that range is about 1 to 2 grams of actually fat to protein. But obviously, if you're an athlete, if you're a bodybuilder, you're trying to put on muscle mass, that's going to change, and you're going to need more of the protein side as well. And so that's a very good demonstration of that concept of, it's not just, don't be rigid and adhere to like, this is the exact ratio that I need, but give your body what it demands for what you're doing. I think that was a very good point that you brought up. One thing as well, what about the magic? You have to have carbs to build muscle. If you don't eat carbs, you can't build muscle. What about that old chestnut?
Well, this is another stigma. I mean, what would carbohydrates do with the muscle tissue?
Hmm.
Why you cannot build muscle if you don't eat carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are simply energy for the body. There's nothing more than that. There is no nutritional value in them, because for that fact, the simple fact that we don't have any essential carbohydrates, And we have essential amino acids, and we also have essential fatty acids, but we don't have anything which is essential regarding carbohydrates. The simple answer to that is because you don't need them. You can always produce them from fat, from protein, from ketones. Glycogen can turn into from lactate. So there are so many different pathways that the body will always produce glucose. This is why we don't have anything which is called essential carbohydrate. But you have essential amino acids, and you have essential fatty acids. So you need them for muscle growth. I mean, so many times I have always repeated the fact that the best bodybuilders, according to me, who were bodybuilders in 70s and 80s, who didn't rely exclusively on steroids, but relied on training as the major factor for muscle growth, they exclusively followed high protein, medium fat diet. Some of them ate a bit of carbohydrates. Most of them didn't even eat them. How did they do it? Just look at those bodies. Those bodies are made, they are like paradigms of human aesthetics. Everybody wants to look like Serge Nubre. Everybody wants to look like Frank Zane or Bob Paris or Arnold Schwarzenegger. Everybody wants to look like that. Nobody wants to look like people today on the stage. Yeah, you want to watch them because this is a freak show now, and it sells. Yes, it's a freak show. These people are, they're ridiculous. I remember in my days when I competed, when I trained, I went and trained with Serge Nubre, and I also trained with Lee Haney, and I trained with Mike Christian and a few other, lot of professional bodybuilders in London, amazing guys, and we all depended on training. This is why we had to do high volume, high reps. This is why we train muscle 30, 40 sets once a week. You leave that muscle to recover, not just muscle, but the whole unit, connective tissues as well, central nervous system. And then you train that again next week. And we all relied on training. Workout was the most important factor for growth. Nowadays, is not. It's secondary. Now, primary driver for muscle growth today are obviously exogenous compounds, steroids, insulin, growth hormone in super huge amounts. And people are changing. They imagine a beginner enters the gym now, and in 2 years, he is like 3 times his size when he started, and he competes already. And in 3-4 years, it's professional. How did you do that? We couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. It's impossible if you rely on training as the major factor for growth. So if the training is the major factor for growth, then you have to follow the diet which is low in carbohydrates, high in protein, because you need that to build tissue. So you need protein, not carbs. Now, where are people confused? People are confused because they see so many advanced bodybuilders or professional bodybuilders or coaches today who are mainly concerned about professional bodybuilding, who are advocating high amount of carbohydrates, but they don't tell you the whole story. You know, every sentence starts after that word, but. You know, this is good, but. You should do this, but. Yeah, but you need to say that second part of the sentence. Explain to people how can somebody eat 300, 400, 500 grams of carbs and still maintain decent shape. This is impossible to do without insulin, exogenous insulin, because this is a powerful agent that literally shovels glucose into glycogen and increases glycogen stores. And if you are a natural bodybuilder, or even somebody who is taking a reasonable or low amount of steroids, is not going to work for you. I deal with people like that all the time. I also have professional bodybuilders who, for the reason mentioned, have to eat 6-7 times per day and have to have 50 to 70 grams of carbs, even 100 grams of carbs in every meal. But I have given you the second part of the sentence after that but. So now you put yourself in any camp. If you want to be a professional bodybuilder and take everything that you have to, because everybody does, so you need to be on a same plane, that's one story. But if you are natural, or if you are just taking reasonable amount of steroids or minimum amount of steroids, then this is not going to work for you. You will benefit more from low carb, no carb, high protein, high fat, medium fat, low fat, depending on individual activities. But protein is a structural component, is a building block. So carbohydrates have nothing to do with growth. Absolutely nothing. I had a good friend of mine who has unfortunately passed away a few years
Oh.
ago, Nasser El Sumbati. He was one of the best bodybuilders in the world. He should have beat Dorian Yates in '97 on Olympia. He finished second. I knew him very well. I remember Nasser in 90, I think it was 89. I won in 1988 in Yugoslavia, heavyweight division. He didn't compete that year. He competed in 1987, I think. He was as good as everybody was. But then he came 2 years later and he put about 10, 15 kgs of muscle, on that level. When you're 100 and now you're 115, you look double in size, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, we were very good. So I said, Nasser, how do you do this? Oh, he said, you know what? You have to understand, we never ate enough protein. He said, what are you talking about? He said, Nash, I'm pushing 400 or 500 grams of protein a day now. I said, Nasser, what are you talking about? He said, if you want to put more, you have to eat more. But he didn't say eat carbs, eat protein.
Mm-hmm.
Now we went for a dinner, right? And there was a lot of people there. And we all ordered steak and jacked potatoes, roast potatoes. Everybody was doing that, a bit of salad. Nasser ordered 2 steaks, no carbs. And steaks in Serbia are massive. They are probably 1 pound in meat, in weight. And he ordered 2, and he was sitting next to me. And I was looking at him. I said, you don't need anything else? No salad, no potatoes? He said, no, you don't need it. All you need is this. Sitting next to me. So, I mean, guys, what else do you want?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to hear this anywhere. I'm talking about Nasser El Sumbati. He was my friend. We were very close. And he was telling me everything. We didn't hide anything. He was, with me, at least he was sharing everything. So this fact that Nasser didn't eat half a steak and 3 pounds of potatoes, but he had 0 potatoes and 2 pounds of steak is usually the best story that should explain to you the importance of most obviously essential compound, which is protein, nothing to do with carbs.
Yeah. And I really was interested when the last time we spoke, I was sort of wondering like where did this whole carbohydrate thing come from? Because in the golden era, 70s, 80s, wasn't anything about carbohydrate. I mean, you'd have some maybe, but they weren't just carb loading like crazy. Like I say, that's what you have to do now. And you had mentioned that about insulin. That's when Dorian Yates first started really just exploding into the mass monster era and started using a lot of insulin. And it sort of, we end up getting the cart before the horse. People, because he was taking all this insulin, he had to take the carbohydrates as well, or he'd slip into a coma and die. And we sort of get that backwards. He's taking the insulin as a growth hormone, and he has to have carbs to not die. And then we flip that around and people think, ooh, I have to have carbohydrates. That's the end goal. Carbohydrates will make me big, and carbohydrates will raise some insulin, and that will give this effect. Like, well, to an extent, but your body has a limitation on how much insulin it can pump out. It's not going to be able to produce as much insulin as you can inject. And so it's, you can eat the same amount of carbs, but you won't get the same jump in your insulin. You'll get more glycation, you'll get more damage. It will take longer to get that out of your system. And so I found that very interesting. The other thing is, we talked about this as well, was there are more and more studies coming out now showing that not only can you build the same amount of muscle or have no impedance in building muscle on a ketogenic diet. There's a meta-analysis that came out a few years ago showing that you don't need carbohydrates for hypertrophy as long as you're matching protein. So if you have if it's protein match between 2 groups, ketogenic or carbohydrate group, still build the same amount of muscle. But now there are more studies coming out now showing that glycation, those advanced glycation end products, can actually damage and hinder hypertrophy and muscle growth. So this could actually be a burden to muscle growth. So there's a number of studies, but that the AGEs block muscle hypertrophy in both humans and animals, and leads to skeletal muscle atrophy. That was a brand new study that came out, a review that came out in 2026, just this year. So there's a lot of these different things. I'll put those links in the in the bio or in the description here, along with the faster trial and the other things we've been talking about, so people can take a look at them. But this is coming out in the literature now. We have faster trials showing that you don't have any drop in glycogen in your muscles before, after, and 3 hours after recovery. You have the McSweeney 2018 trial showing that ketogenic athletes outperform carbohydrate fuel athletes as long as they've been keto adapted for at least 3 months on a 100-mile run, a 6-second sprint, and a powerlifting test. So all the different ways you can move your body athletically, the ketogenic group beat them. And now we have study after meta-analyses of studies showing that as long as protein is matched being in ketosis, so 0 carbohydrates, you're getting the same muscle hypertrophy. And in fact, that too much excess glycation can actually hinder and block muscle hypertrophy as well. It can damage the extracellular tissue and actually impede muscle hypertrophy and slow you down. So doing exactly what we've been told for 30 years is going to make you a better athlete and build muscle faster could actually be doing the opposite.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I mean, the another thing that a lot of people forget is that, it's not only about a few years of your bodybuilding life when you're 20 or 30, maybe. So for 5, 6, maybe 10 years. And then after that, what happens after that? Oh, I don't care when I get after 30. I don't care when I'm 30. And then you have others saying, oh, I don't care when I'm 40. Or you will care because you will get 30 and you will get 40. And for most people, actually, life starts when they get into that age because most of things in life are actually much better. People are more settled and they know exactly a little bit more about life. And sorry, you can continue to grow muscles. You can still keep yourself in fantastic shape and have a great life, whatever you do, without having terrifying injuries, as we've seen with a lot of people who have been exposed to all this tremendous amount of exogenous compounds, steroids, insulin, and the growth hormone. And the bad stories that have happened in the sport. This is obviously the part of the whole picture, is that wrong attitude towards food. There are a lot of bodybuilders, not just bodybuilders, other athletes who are now obese, who are disabled, who have their muscles torn, hips replaced, shoulder joints, knees replaced, all gone. What is happening to them now? And they're 40 or 50. If you want to go that way, if you really don't care what's going to happen when you're 30 or 40 or 50 or 60, then you're playing a Russian roulette with your life. You can do whatever you want. You may be successful for a few years, but what is going to happen on a metabolically with you when you get older? How are you going to perform? What about your cartilages, mobility, etc.? This is a different story. So when I advise people about best possible way of training and the best possible way of dieting, this is not just for quick fix. I don't want people to be in shape only for competitions. I want them to be in shape year round, to look good, to have happy life, healthy life every year for the rest of their lives, not just now for a month. And then what happens? You see them, oh, now I'm in the off season. I'm bulking. No, you're not bulking. You're just getting fat, full of water. You high blood pressure, water retention, sodium. You're stressing your kidneys, everything. Glycation is happening without you knowing it. So why are you doing that? People are doing that simply because humans are generally lazy. Now food is cheap, is everywhere. So it's nice to eat all this rice and pasta and have ice cream here and there and pizza. And then, I get in shape before the show. But what about the rest of your life? The whole year, you're just looking wrong and you're metabolically wrong as well. That's the problem. So when I talk and I give advice, it's usually related to healthy eating and the best way of exercising in order to be in shape year round for the rest of your life. This is the point. So guys, if you want to be really good looking and in good shape and in good health for the rest of your life, I think there are a lot of good advice that you can benefit from today in our discussion.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the way I look at it as well. Yes, you can you maybe modify things to get a specific result, like in bodybuilding, etc. But like you said, I mean, what got you there? What got you into that good shape? Why change something right at the last minute and then do something different right before competition? That doesn't really make sense. There's the old saying, don't change you don't change a horse mid-race. Do the thing that's getting you the results that you want, and stick with it. But also, I look at this for health and just long-term health, for the rest of people's lives, not just a quick fix and churn and burn. And that's the sort of, when people try to disparage a carnivorous diet or a ketogenic diet, they say, well, this works short term, but you wouldn't want to do it long term. This is harmful long term. Or people will do it to get some quick results, reverse their diabetes quickly and reverse their autoimmunity quickly, but then it'll be bad. It's like, I don't think people are really listening to themselves. If you're reversing diabetes, you're reversing autoimmunity, you're losing weight, you're improving your health, that's actually going to give you long-term benefits. You're not going to reverse multiple sclerosis, diabetes, and heart failure, and then somehow that's going to kill you or something. That's really bad. It's bad to reverse autoimmunity. It's bad to reverse heart failure for some reason. It doesn't really make sense. So this is for health first and foremost. For me, this I look from a patient perspective. You're looking at it from an athletic perspective as well. And I work with athletes as well. But it's the same thing. I mean, look, this is how our body is fueled. You eat what your body needs, you give your body what it's supposed to have, and you exclude out things that can be detrimental. Your body should work well or optimally, whether you're sedentary sitting on the couch or, crushing it as a professional athlete. So, it's just do the thing that's going to make you healthiest longest. You'll get the best results from a health perspective and athletic perspective.
Okay, let me tell you something very simple.
Yeah.
I'm 64, right?
Hmm.
I still do the same workouts as I did when I was 20, 30, 40, 50.
Hmm.
Nothing changed.
Hmm.
Nothing changed. I train 5 times per week. I do 30 sets per session, never longer than 50 minutes. My girlfriend is doing the same with me, and people are coming and saying to me, this is impossible. There is no way. I'm not going to spend 3 hours in the gym to do 30 sets.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm doing it now, and I'm all covered in veins. My legs are split. People think when they see me that I'm going to be competing in a week or two.
Mm.
And I'm not. I don't want to compete anymore. My last show is in 1995.
Mm.
So I'm just cruising now. I'm maintaining, and I'm very happy with the shape and the strength and obviously abilities. I don't have any pain in my knees, hips, shoulders, elbows, zero. Injuries, zero. I had a massive competitive career of 10 years. I've done fantastic results. So how is this possible? What do
Mm.
I do? What do I take? I just do what I'm saying. High volume, never go to failure. 1 rep, 2 reps, shy of failure. Protein, high protein, medium fat diet, no carbs. This is what I do. And
Mm.
if that is not enough, let me tell you this. I recently launched in March 90 days transformation challenge, and I accepted only 20 people who are now going through.
Mm.
And those 20 people in that particular challenge have sent me images when they started. And now every month they're sending me new images. And you will see everybody is on the same diet, the same program, slightly modified depending on individual, depending on their fitness experience and level. But you should see how they change. I'm talking 4 weeks. Every month they send me different new pictures. And the
Mm.
changes are remarkable, unbelievable. And their comments are unreal. They never thought this would be possible. And after 3 months, so end of May, I'm going to choose the guy who has achieved the best transformation, and I'm going to introduce him to my viewers in the special video in which I will do the interview with the guy, and he will say, because they're all men for some reason, no women joined.
Mm.
It was open for everyone, but this is the story. This time, I'll do this again in May. I'll do the new one, and you should see how people change immediately. 4 weeks, I'm not talking
Mm.
4 months, 4 years, in 4 weeks. I just got few of the clients who participants who sent me images yesterday and day before, and the guy said, I never had six pack in my life. I thought, and I will never have it. And
Mhm.
now he started seeing it. And imagine, he is in his 50s. He was literally quite, fat. And now in 4 weeks, the six pack started coming through. This is, and we all do this online. I don't even train them one to one personally, live, obviously, in person, but they are still changing. Why? Because they are following the advice. And what is the advice? Once again, is high volume workout, is high protein, medium fat, low carb or zero carb. This is the secret, the mystery, the mystery for life.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the key that unlocks all these mysterious doors,
Yeah.
and it's happening over and over again. I mean, in the last 35 years, with over 3,500 clients, the story repeats itself again and again and again.
Mhm.
So I also have a lot of no sayers who are religiously connected to carbohydrates. I don't know why. It's not my problem. Probably there are different reasons, psychological or pleasures or beliefs, whatever. But they simply don't want to hear these things, and everything is transparent. I mean, my son is doing the same. He looks fantastic. He's 25. He's about 96, 7 kgs, natural. Never
Mhm.
doesn't even take vitamins,
Mhm.
minerals, nothing. Just 2, 3 meals a day, high protein, medium fat. That's it.
Mhm.
End of story.
Yeah.
It's very
Fantastic.
simple. For us, it's very simple. You know what you're doing. You look amazing,
Hmm.
and you're wondering why are people complicating so much? Just copy and paste, and that's
Yeah.
it. Simple.
Yeah,
This is what we are
exactly.
trying to deliver this message, but
Yeah. Well, you can lead a horse to water. You can't make him drink. You
exactly.
can show them all this and show them all the evidence, but then, then there's someone else and they're saying similar things. But do they back it up? Do they have the performance, to back it up? Have they been, competing at this level? Are there as many people getting these results? You could say, well, there's this one, vegetarian bodybuilder who does a bunch of steroids and is not all that built. He just looks like an average guy at the gym, but he has been vegetarian. Like, there was a guy in the Game Changers that did that, and he'd sort of been he would eat eggs, but most of that was vegetables. And then for the Game Changers thing, he dropped eggs, and he said, "Wow, this made everything so much better." Well, maybe it did, maybe it didn't, but either way, he's going to have to take a lot of supplements and protein and vegan protein and this is and that's and vitamins and minerals and do steroids. And the thing is, he doesn't even look like he's on steroids. So it's like it's like his body is just not. I mean, I looked like him when I was 17, just eating meat and working out a lot, and playing sports, basically for, a decade at that point. And and they'll take that one person and say, well, look at this outline, look at this person. That proves it. And like, well, no, it doesn't. Because the vast majority of people eating that way don't look like that. And can't look like that, even with supplements, and unless they do take steroids or something like that. But we see everybody who does this eating fat and protein, no carbs, even full carnivore. We see all of them do this. We see all of them lose body fat. We see all of them put on muscle, lean body mass. Yeah, I have patients that are in their 80s putting on muscle, and that's very
Yeah.
hard to do. That's something that is not just for vanity. That's something that can save your life, because there's a very strong association between muscle mass and longevity, and also independence. And most people don't want to live to be 90 or 100 or 110 if they're spending 30 of those years in a nursing home, bedridden, right? That's not something that they want. So this is a matter of keeping your independence. I mean, you keep working out like this, you're never going to have a problem. You're never going to be in a nursing home. You're never going to be have any issue with your mobility, having falls, broken hips, things like that. Neither am I. And that's because, we're staying healthy and we're not giving that up. But I even have patients that were in nursing homes that then changed to this and were able to come out of nursing homes and start putting on muscle at 86, and so, the odds of you doing that on a vegetarian diet, even with all of the supplements and vitamins and protein powders and things like that, is next to zero. I mean, I would be very surprised if there was even one example of someone having done that.
I have a client who is almost 80 now, and is one of the best bodies in the gym. He's training 5 times per week. He says, there is only one Bible in my life. I said, which one is that? His name is Rogan. And he says, this is your book, The Ultimate Nutrition, which I published in 2010. So Rogan has been with me since 2000, 26 years.
Yeah, wow.
And I post pictures of Rogan everywhere. People just can't believe. He's all covered in veins. He drives a Ferrari, by the way.
Oh yeah,
He's
nice.
80 years old. Yeah, why not?
Yeah,
no, why not?
Exactly.
Why not? And he came to me, and he was a marathon runner. No legs, no arms, big belly, running. He can run forever. And he said to me, you know what? One day I thought to myself, I look in the mirror and I said, Rogan, you've been running for 30 years, and look at you. You want to be like this? No. So I said, I have to start going to the gym. So he came to me. He was 54 in 2000. And from that, I turned him into superhuman. And now he's 80. And you see him walking. Like, if you see him from behind, you'll probably think he's some guy like 40 years old or something like that. He's so strong, stable. He's not huge, but he's all muscular. It's just people are stopping him on the street and saying, can I ask you something? How old are you? Because they can't believe the body they see. And that's somebody who is, not in his youngest days. And it's fascinating. But it's not magic. It's possible. Obviously, Rogan is very disciplined. He eats 5-6 eggs in the morning, then about 350 grams of meat for lunch, and another either fish or chicken legs or something in the evening, a bit of veg here and there, carbs, 0. And he keeps my book next to his bed. He says, every night I read my Bible.
Yeah, nice.
And this is actually the book in which I talk about, even in 2010, yes, I think is that year when I published it. And that's all about high protein and fat diet, no carbs. I'll explain why. So again, it's so transparent in the real world. It's just what you choose to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So just one last thing I wanted to touch on before we finished up was the you mentioned before we got on, was it's not about necessarily how much protein you eat, but also how much you absorb and actually able to utilize. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, for a long time now, from probably my awakening in bodybuilding, when I realized actually that I need to change my training. So from heavy duty principles, I went into high volume. And also when I realized that the high protein diet, a low carb diet is something that I need to follow, I started talking about the same thing, which I emphasize today even more in all my videos. And this is that, the old saying, you are what you eat, is not true. You are not what you eat. You are what you absorb. Because you can eat 300 grams of protein in 6 meals with carbohydrates, or you can eat 300 grams of protein in 3 meals with fat, no carbohydrates, and you will absorb that protein very differently. So when you eat smaller portions, especially with carbs, you will have high spikes, not only of glucose, but also of protein. So when you eat chicken and rice, chicken breast and rice, no fat, you're going to have massive spike in glucose and in amino acids. So everybody who doubts that can check themselves, check their blood 2 hours after you eat chicken and rice. You will see what is going to happen to your spike. So insulin will be high, and that insulin will wipe out not just glucose, but also most of amino acids and use them as energy wherever they go. They can be used for energy or stored for energy. So amino acids are going to be wasted because of the spike. So you don't want the spike. You don't want 6, 7 small meals of carbs and protein only. You want something else. You want 3 meals, 100 grams of protein, 50 to 60, 70, depending again, grams of fat per meal. But you want those meals to be spread through the day. You want 5, 6 hours between each meal. Now, what happens now? Now, because of fat content in the meal, your digestion will be slower. So you will be releasing amino acids slower in your bloodstream, meaning there is not going to be a spike of amino acids. So you're going to have sustained release of amino acids. So all these 100 grams of protein will be utilized much more efficiently than if you have 40, 50 grams a few times per day. This is very different. And you will absorb them better. They will end up where they should be. And this is why not just me, but so many of my clients, also golden era people like Serge Nubre and similar, they didn't eat too many meals per day. There are occasions where people ate only twice per day, high amount of protein and fat, 0 carbs, and they all ended up in amazing shape. The reason for that is not magical, is that sustained release of amino acids. And this is how human body works. This is what human physiology prefers, because you need to reset your hormones. So insulin comes, but it drops down, has time to drop down before your next meal. But when you eat all the time, your insulin is always high. You're always in that elevated state of insulin. You're hyperinsulinemic. And this is not good for you, not just for muscle, not just for putting on fat. It's not good for your health, for your metabolic health. You want that insulin low, and you want sustained release of amino acids. You don't want any spikes. And this principle, this approach to diet will benefit you more for growth and also keep you in shape, especially if you're natural. And again, if you're not abusing steroids. If you're somebody who is super abusing steroids, taking insulin and growth hormone and other compounds like IGF-1, for example, not to mention the whole plethora of magic bullets, then the story is very different. I'm not talking about that. I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
So then you need to find somebody else to teach you how many units, 20 to 40 units of insulin, when to take them, fast insulin, slow insulin, what to eat, to carry a bag full of sugar with you. Because when you start wobbling and shaking on the street or in the car or in the tube, you will have to suck that sugar and stop, or you're just going to faint, as so many people did. So I'm not interested in that scenario. Those movies, they require different producers and managers. So I don't talk about that. I'm talking about natural people and people who do not abuse steroids, just take small amount. Because I work with people like that, and they all respond fantastic. So yes, another big problem with the high protein diet is that people often come to me and say, "Oh, I cut my carbs. I feel flat. I have no energy. I lost my strength." So the problem most of the time is, number one, they don't eat enough protein. So they were maybe on 150 grams of protein, 300 grams of carbs. They cut 300 grams of carbs, but they don't increase protein, or they just increase up to 200. So they have a massive gap in caloric intake. And of course, you're going to start fainting, not lifting heavy weights, because you have cut your caloric intake into half or more than that. Not to mention fat. That's the second problem. On high protein diet, you have to have fat, because otherwise, if you just eat protein, it's going to be spiking quickly, because protein on its own is digested very quickly. This is why you have to have fat in your diet. This is where steak and eggs come up. If you have a choice between chicken breast and chicken legs, you should eat chicken legs, maybe with skin as well, because all these connective tissue, skin, they're very important for you. They're full of collagen, some amount of vitamin C as well, and chicken breast doesn't have none of it. So if you still want to eat chicken breast, put some cheese on the top, increase the fat content. That's the best choice, because on its own, chicken breast is fast digesting protein. Almost not the same, but almost the same, like a whey protein shake. So when you have whey protein shake, it just shoots into your bloodstream immediately. So what happens? Nobody knows what happens. You have a spike of amino acids, and 50 grams of whey protein, maybe 25, maybe 30, 40, we don't know. That will end up as energy, but not as what you want. It's not going to be muscle building blocks. So for that to happen, you have to eat diet, which is basically the staple human diet. It
Mhm.
was never whey protein shake and chicken breast with broccoli. It was always either a steak or eggs or fatty parts of the meat. And this is how we evolved. This is our uh, physiological environment. This is how human body blossoms, flourishes when you put that in your body. And everybody who does immediately feels that well-being factor. Oh, I'm feeling so light. I'm full of energy. My mind is bright. I don't have brain fog since I cut carbohydrates. Yes, these are the consequences. So again, for you and me, things are very transparent. We are having such a hard time, bringing this to the masses of people. But whoever tries this, I mean, everybody can just go and read the comments on my videos on YouTube.
Mhm.
This is amazing. It's simply amazing. Just read what other people say. People
Mhm.
who follow this type of diet and this type of training, and it works exclusively for everyone. This is another amazing thing. It's very, very rarely that somebody, when people have a problem, as I said, they either don't increase protein or they don't put fat into their diet.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And yeah, all very good points. And just going back to the sort of the plant-based way of eating here is that whole point. Doesn't matter how many grams of protein are in your brown rice and lentils. It matters what you absorb, and the bioavailability is very low because we are not designed to eat these things because we don't have the biochemistry and the enzymes to break down and extract those nutrients. That is all the proof that you need. Some people need a lot more, but really that's all you need. We don't have the enzymes to break these things down and extract these nutrients. And so that is clear proof that we are not designed to eat them, where you can get 100% of these nutrients typically from meat. But from plants, you can't. There's low bioavailability. Sometimes it's only, maybe you're getting 2/3, maybe you're getting a third, maybe you're getting 0%. Gluten is a protein. There's predominant protein found in wheat. It has 0% bioavailability. You get none of those proteins. All it does is damage your gut. That's it. So we need to understand that. And these studies and these activists for pushing a more plant-based approach, they say, well, the protein from plants are better. Well, what is that based on? It's not based on any actual metric of health. And it doesn't have a complete set of proteins and essential and conditionally essential proteins. That's a really important one, is the conditionally essential proteins, amino acids, because things like carnitine and taurine we supposedly make, but under certain circumstances, pregnancy, bodybuilding, these sorts of things, your demands can be higher than your body can naturally meet. And so that would then make it so you'd have to get it from your diet. Taurine and carnitine are only found in meat. When you eat a lot of fiber, you end up needing more taurine because you make taurine in your liver, that's expelled in your bile, and bile gets bound up by fiber, and then you lose it. You don't absorb it anymore. So you actually lose the taurine with that. So people that are on a high fiber diet have low taurine, and then there are people that genetically just don't make enough taurine or carnitine to begin with, and so they actually require this from their diet at all times. And plants just don't contain that. They also don't contain the right proportions of these amino acids because, again, we're not designed for these things. But when our DNA codes for any molecule, those are strings of amino acids. And so if you have all these amino acids in abundance, but you are deficient in one, you run out of just one of those, that whole protein just stops getting made. It just stops there, and it's waiting for another amino acid, and then everything else can click into place. So you stop production for everything just because you're short on one amino. So if it's not in the right balance, it doesn't matter that on paper you have a so-called complete protein. If they're not in the right ratios, if you don't have enough lysine, you're not going to make those proteins. If you don't have enough carnitine, you're not going to make these proteins. So that's really important too. And of course, the bioavailability. The studies that look at plant proteins versus animal proteins, and you can get the same level of hypertrophy, of muscle development with plant-based proteins versus animal-based proteins. They're using protein isolates. They're using, protein that has been amino acids that have been stripped out and digested for you. So that, they're in this sort of an elemental form where they're just their amino acids. So you sort of get past that bioavailability thing. You take away the protease inhibitors, you take away the tannins and all these other sorts of things. That's another thing. Plants come with tannins that bind to proteins, prevent you from absorbing them. They have protease inhibitors like in wheat and soy and many other plants that block protease, which breaks down your proteins and allows you to absorb them. So for all these reasons, eating a whole plant diet or an omnivorous diet, that can actually prevent you from absorbing as much protein quite severely. I mean, tannins specifically denature protein so you can't absorb them at all. So if someone has a glass of wine with their steak, they might be blocking out 30% of their protein absorption depending on how much they're having and how many tannins are in there. So things like that. And so people think, well, you can get the same. This study says that you can get the same muscle hypertrophy as long as you get enough, grams of protein or match from plants or from meat. Those are only talking about isolated amino acids in their elemental form that you've sort of done the digestion for them, and so they're more readily available. And you remove the tannins, you've removed the protease inhibitors. So they're not a problem in the first place. But getting it in actual food, I mean, we're not living out, unless you want to live out of a tub your whole life, fine. But if you want to eat real food, the bioavailability and the access and quality of the protein from plant-based versus meat is there's just no comparison.
Absolutely agree about everything you said. Yeah. You see, the problem also with fiber is that we can't digest fiber because we don't have bacteria for that. Appendix is an organ which is not active in humans, but is there. It may have been at some point through evolution active, but for example, in gorillas, appendix is full of particular type of bacteria, which the only role is to digest fiber. So this is why they eat high fiber diet, because they break that fiber into fatty acids and use fatty acids for energy, not carbs, because they don't eat any carbs. They don't eat pasta and rice anyway. So we need to look into our physiology. Also, the diet that you mentioned, plant food, is full of fiber and full of carbs anyway. So I had few lectures in the group of they called me, actually invited me a few times, vegetarian groups, and I explained all this to them. And after every single session, there will be at least half of them who come forward and say, you know what, I'm going to rethink everything. I'm going to start eating maybe fish and eggs, maybe this and that. So people are, when they get exposed to the reality, if you're vegetarian or vegan for some ethical reasons or philosophical reasons or religious reasons, there is no discussion there. But if you want to, put it with arguments and discuss it rationally, then we can argue, we can talk. Because I'm not going to argue if you are saying, my religion doesn't allow me to eat meat. Fine, no problem. End of story, nothing to talk about. But if you think that is good for you, then we can talk. Then let's see, why do you think it's good? I'm going to tell you why it's not good. And every time I've given them the talk, there was in Hampstead a few times, and people there are very affluent and they like to be modern in a way, so they're all vegans or vegetarians just because it's a trend, right? Like a sect or something. I mean, ridiculous. And they were all fat. So how is that good for you? Who is in shape there? No muscles, just fat. No muscles, obviously, because the proteins go very low biological value. And that food is full of carbohydrates. So what is then end story, end product? You end up with no muscle tissue, very small amount of muscle tissue, and full of fat. How good is that? How good is that for longevity? And then, I give them the lecture, and then some of them start training with me, and immediately they start eating something. I always prefer whole foods rather than protein powders, because we are not created to eat protein powders. We are created to eat food. You need protein with fat that you get in meat, in eggs, in fish, in all other products. not protein powders, as you mentioned. So I had few vegetarian clients, but they were eating eggs and they were eating cheese and cottage cheese, and they were taking tons of protein shakes, which I still, although they put on muscle, they were not in good shape because they still kept eating those vegetarian meals, which are full of fat, wrong fat, and carbs, and this is the issue. So, well, if you want to reason, yes, we can reason. If you don't want to reason, then I wish you all the best. What can I say?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Yosef, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for coming on again. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. Please let everybody know where they can find you on your various channels and where they can see more.
Yes, they just put my name, Dr. Nash Jocic, and they can see me on YouTube on my videos as well. And obviously in the link that you can put in the comments, and they can just come over and share experience with me and hopefully benefit with new
Absolutely.
information. Yeah.
Great.
Thank
Well,
you very much for having me. Yeah.
oh, you're very welcome. And I'll put your information down in the description below, along with the various studies that we spoke about as well. So,
Very good.
thank you all very much. Really appreciate that. Hopefully, you got a lot out of it, especially the athletes out there, people that were curious about losing their athletic performance and muscle building potential by changing their diet for their health. Hopefully, that's cleared the air. If you know anybody that could benefit from this, please do share this with them to help them get the information that they need. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.